in Banjo Land, Mike Hedding here. Just got a free banjo lesson for you today. I had a request from someone out in the audience if I could do a lesson on how to get faster. So how to improve your speed on the banjo. And I was a little conflicted about doing this lesson because as a teacher, I'd probably recommend really not focusing on your speed at all, especially if you're a beginner. I'd more focus on things like your tone, your taste, your timing, really the solid 3 T's of banjo playing. And I'd actually probably recommend not focusing on your speed really at all. But on the other hand, as a student, I know that playing fast is really cool, and you know, I probably wouldn't have listened to my teacher if he or she said don't focus on playing fast. I would have still wanted to play fast. So I'm going to give you some tips, but I'd also preface that with saying that I strongly believe that there are no shortcuts. So if you're looking for shortcuts to playing faster, you're probably not going to find them here. But if you're willing to put in the slow, diligent, hard work, you'll definitely be able to get faster, I can assure you that. So let's look at the first tip. And my first tip is a little counterintuitive, but it's really going to be kind of shifting your mindset of how you think about speed. And there's a great quote from a mandolin player, Evan Marshall, who said something like, speed is a byproduct of control, not the other way around. So I'd encourage you to really think about your level of control on the banjo, not your speed. So if you have control, you can play really fast, you can play really slow, you can play right in the middle. If you only have speed, you're really going to have some gaps in your playing. It's, you know, a banjo player that can only play fast but can't play slow isn't really going to be a high level player. You know, all the good, really fast players can also play really slow as well. And that's really important. So I would, again, shift your mindset a little bit. Instead of thinking, how fast am I going, really start to think of how much control do I have over the instrument. Because if you have the control, then you got freedom to really do whatever you want. And I think that is what you're really striving for. It's not to be able to go fast necessarily, but really to feel in control of the banjo. So that'd be my first tip, is focus on your control, not your speed. So my second tip is going to be a little specific to you, and you're going to have to do a little kind of investigating while you're practicing to figure out what's going on here, because there's not a one remedy for all speed problems. So my second tip is figure out what's causing you to hit your speed wall and then find the solution, because different problems are going to have different solutions. So I call hitting the speed wall is basically when you've maxed out at your top speed and you kind of crash and burn or crash into the wall, as it were. And that's, you know, hitting your speed wall. So there's a couple different things that you can think about. Okay, why am I hitting my speed wall? One obvious one is that as you increase your speed, your accuracy starts to go down. So maybe you start missing strings. Maybe you start, you know, instead of hitting the 3rd string, you hit the 2nd string, or instead of using your index finger, you use your thumb. Very common problem as you start speeding up, your accuracy might decrease. So the remedy to that might be very different than a different problem with hitting your speed wall, which is tension. So another very, very common thing, as basically as your speed goes up, for most people, their level of tension also goes up. So a huge part of being able to play fast is to be able to stay relaxed. So again, figure out what's causing you to hit your speed wall. If you're getting really tense, but not necessarily missing the strings, then focus on staying relaxed, where working on your accuracy might not be the solution that you really need at the moment. Vice versa, if you start missing all these strings, maybe staying relaxed isn't the issue, but it's more an issue of economy of motion. So maybe you have excess movements that you need to reduce. So again, there can be very different solutions to very different problems. I think it's common to kind of think that all speed issues are like from a singular problem, and that's really not the case. It's usually kind of an accuracy issue or a tension issue or a coordinating the two hands issue. So really kind of you're going to have to be a little self-aware here and really analyze your practice and analyze what's going on when you really crank up the speed and try and hit your speed wall, okay? So that's my second tip, is figure out, first you got to figure out what the problem is before you can figure out the solution. So again, if you're getting super tense, work on relieving your tension. If you're start missing strings, work on your economy of motion. And this is going to be different for everyone because there's so many variables in playing the banjo. You know, your body, your shape, the size of your hands, the way you're sitting, all those things make a big difference. Okay, so my third tip is clock yourself with a metronome or a drum machine or something that gives you a number, preferably a number level that you're playing at. So I can currently play at 80 beats a minute, okay, or something like that, or 100 beats. Doesn't matter what it is, because what I found with speed is that your perception will change over time. And that can be confusing for students because what used to feel really fast might not feel fast anymore. So you might kind of get into this weird thing where you don't feel like you're getting faster, but you really are, but your perception of how fast you're going is changing. And my analogy for that is always related to driving. So when you get on the highway for the first time, you know, going 60 or 80 or whatever feels really fast. But after you've been on the highway for 5 or 10 minutes, it doesn't feel fast anymore. So your perception as you improve can get better or can change over time. So that's why it's really important to clock yourself with the metronome and know, okay, I'm playing at 100 beats, and then check yourself in a month or two and see, okay, I'm up to 110 or I'm up to 105. Maybe you're only up 1 beat a minute. But you have now concrete evidence that you are getting faster, and that's really important. And it's also important to just think of your speed relative to how far you're along. So I always focus on, am I playing at my fastest level? I might not be playing as fast as I want to yet, but am I playing at my fastest level that I've ever played at? And as long as I'm doing that, I'm on the right track. My next tip is practice playing extremely slowly as much as you practice playing extremely fast, okay? So this goes back to that control issue. So maybe I'm working on something that I eventually want to speed up, and maybe I start it really slow. Maybe if I even try and go slower. And then I try and slowly speed it up. I just keep cranking it up until I hit my speed wall. And then I stop and analyze. Okay, was I getting super tense? Did I start missing the strings? Did I start missing the licks? Did my fingers start flying? You know, again, different problems are going to need different solutions. And this is, again, where you're going to have to kind of really analyze your playing. You need to analyze your playing to get better. So you really got to figure out what are those issues that you're facing, and it's going to be different for everyone. And that's how you're really going to improve. But again, if you can't really slow it down and focus on those movements and making, you know, the littlest movements possible. And this brings me to my next tip, that mistakes basically are amplified as you crank up the speed, right? So again, back to our analogy of driving, right? If you're driving 5-10 miles an hour, you know, you can turn the wheel quite a bit and you're not going to go off the road. You can hit a bump, you can run over a stick, you know, whatever you want. You're pretty much free to pretty much do whatever you want. Same thing with playing banjo really slow. You know, I can lift my fingers way up. I can come way out here, and I can probably get away with it for a while because, again, I'm playing at that slower tempo. But then, if you're driving 100 miles an hour and you make that little crank on the wheel, you know, you're going into the wall. You hit a little bump, you're going into the wall. So remember, your mistakes are basically amplified, and all your movements are going to be amplified at higher speeds. So cranking up the speed is really going to kind of amplify those mistakes. So again, bring it back to playing it really slow. Focus on your economy of motion. Again, all those little movements you're making make that much bigger of a deal at high speeds. You know, are you coming out with your fingers further than you need to? Are you striking the string farther and moving away? You know, all those little things are going to make a big difference at higher speeds. For most people, if you're working on playing faster in Scruggs style, I would recommend working on your right hand. I mean, it could be your left hand is moving around a little bit too much, but usually in relative terms, what you're doing with your left hand on a really fast song in Scruggs style isn't nearly as complicated as what you're doing with your right hand. You know, if you're going, you know, that's really a right hand tricky, or that the right hand is what makes it tricky, not really just going like this with your left hand. So, you know, maybe if you find that you are really flying your fingers with your left hand, you'll have to work on that. But my thought is probably it's going to be an issue with your right hand if you're trying to play fast. The other thing you can do, obviously, and I recommend this in all my videos almost, is separate the two hands. So maybe I go back to that lick. Maybe I play, you know, and I really work on just the right hand. You know, and then I get that down, and then I see if I can add the left hand back. Obviously, if I can't do just the right hand on its own or the left hand on its own, playing them together is going to be even harder. So again, I always separate the two hands, focus on each one. Usually I focus on the right hand more for me personally when I'm playing Scruggs style, and then I try and combine them back together. And really varying the speed is good. It's good practice to keep your brain engaged as well. So if I'm just playing slow or I'm just playing fast, it's easy to kind of zone out. So I really like to modify the speed. You know, I'll slowly crank up the speed and then bring it back down, really kind of trying to keep myself interested and focused on what I'm doing, okay? So my next tip is that you really need to simplify your playing as the speed increases. So again, I think it's a common beginner misconception that, oh, once I get faster, I'll be able to play whatever I want fast. And that's a goal you can certainly have, but kind of in reality, most people, and even most advanced banjo players, will simplify the stuff they're playing as they get faster. You can't play maybe super intricate melodic lines at 300 beats a minute, you know, or maybe there's a more advanced roll that you like to do at slower tempos that you need to toss up. You know, you can't use that at faster tempos. And you know, I think instead of kind of fighting that, I really recommend embracing that. You know, find those rolls that you can do faster. For me, like for one, is the Foggy Mountain. You know, that kind of roll. The forward reverse roll for me. You know, I kind of have my cataloged ones that I can do really fast, or as fast as I can go. And then, you know, I use those when I want to crank up the speed. You know, you can shoot yourself in the foot if you attempt to play something too complex fast. So it's very common to need to simplify things as you go faster. That's totally normal. That's part of the process. And, you know, you're just not going to be able to play everything you could at a medium tempo. If I was going to kick off, you know, a song at a medium tempo versus a fast tempo, I would definitely simplify it. And that's just part of the nature of playing faster. Is you need to simplify your movements, you need to simplify your licks. Again, think of it like driving. If you're going a medium tempo, you know, or a medium speed, you might be able to weave in and out of some cars and, you know, kind of pull some more advanced moves. You know, maybe you take a turn a little sharper or something, but at 100 miles an hour, you know, you basically need to stay straight, you know, focus on not making any big movements, and, you know, avoid getting into a wreck. And again, I think it's the same thing with your banjo playing. So really think of it that way. It's totally fine to have to simplify stuff. So, you know, what I recommend is have your catalog of a few rolls that you can really do at your highest speed, and then have some that you can do at slower speeds. You know, for me, the forward roll, because of how it works out in a bar line, I will use that one faster. But that's definitely a roll that will trip you up more at a really high speed because of the nature of how it works out in a measure. So maybe a roll that, you know, like the alternating thumb roll that's a little more square is something to try at a faster tempo. So that's a really big tip is, again, you can't play everything you want at a high tempo, so you need to simplify your playing as you speed up, okay? So my next tip is back to our tension discussion. So I think one of the most common things that stops you from playing faster is excessive tension. So be proactive about reducing your tension rather than reactive, right? So that's what I always tell my students and myself. I'm always reminding myself of this, because once your arm hurts or your fingers hurt or your shoulders hurt from tension, it's kind of hard to relax again. So I'm always trying to work on being proactive, making sure I'm breathing, making sure my posture is correct, making sure I'm not playing harder than I need to. You know, again, remember when I said your mistakes get amplified? All those little tension things get amplified too. So it might be harder to play 300 beats a minute if you're laying back, you know, in a recliner, you know, watching TV. You know, you might need to sit up straighter. You might need to, you know, make sure you're not hunched over. Those are all things that are really important, you know. So, and I think one of the biggest ones is remembering to breathe. And it sounds really dumb because it's like, oh, well, obviously I remember to breathe. But I can't tell you how many times I've seen banjo players and musicians take a really fast solo, and then at the end of it, they let out this big gasp of air because they haven't been breathing at all. You know, they come up and, you know, and you can see they're holding their breath and their shoulders get really tight. And again, that's not sustainable when you're playing fast. You might be able to do that if you're playing slow and kind of force your way through it, but all those tension things, you're gonna be dead in the water if you have a lot of tension when you're playing fast. So be proactive. Take those extra deep breaths. Make sure you're relaxing. Make sure you have your equipment set up right. Your posture's good. And again, all these are going to be a little bit unique to you. You know, you're going to have to do some experimenting. Look in the mirror. Watch yourself playing. You know, all those little things are going to make a big difference, okay? So that's my next tip, is that make sure you're being proactive rather than reactive. Because once you're tense, it's hard to become untense. So you need to start relaxed and work on staying relaxed, okay? So another tip I can't recommend enough is get a tool like the Amazing Slowdowner, or use the Slowdown on YouTube. I'll have this sound slice player coming up on my website soon that will allow you to adjust the speed of the tab, because realistically you can't try and play faster than you can. You know, if you can't play at 100 beats a minute, you're probably not going to be able to play at 110 beats a minute. You know, I kind of think of this kind of similar to like lifting weights or something. Like if I went into a gym and said, you know, I'm interested in lifting 400 pounds, and you know, the trainer says, well, can you lift 200? And I say, no, I'm ready to get to 400, right? You know, you need to be able to lift 200 pounds before you can play, or lift 400. Same with your banjo, you know, you need to be able to play at 80 beats a minute or 85 before you can play at 90. And one of the best ways to do this is take a solo, take a tab that you're working on, slow it down, slow it way down if you need to, and then gradually speed it up, you know, to where you're basically just touching that speed wall and maybe just inch it back just a tiny bit. So that's, and again, a tool like Amazing Slowdowner, I'll have one on my site coming soon. Those tools are invaluable because you can take a solo that's too fast, you can slow it down to where you want, and then you can gradually slow it up, or speed it up rather. And even if it's only one beat a minute at a time, you know, and that's what's great about these tools like the Slowdowner or Sound Slice, is you'll basically have a percentage. Okay, I'm at 60% of the original, now I'm up to 65, now I'm at 70. Sometimes that visual progress is huge in determining your success because, again, your perception might change. So playing it at 60% might have felt really fast, and then a couple weeks later, 70% feels just fine. I strongly recommend investing in one of those tools that will help you slow down the music to the proper speed and then slowly speed it back up. Super important. Okay, and my last tip is just a banjo setup, okay? You know, if your action is super high, if your bridge is really weird or out of position, again, or you don't have an armrest, all those little things are going to make a big difference, right? You know, if your action is super high and it's super hard to play your banjo, it's probably going to be hard to play fast. So, you know, not that you always want to blame the banjo. There's probably more you could do yourself, but there is some kind of setup reality of if your banjo's set up where it's not easy to play, you know, it's going to be hard to play fast. So that's a small thing. You know, you can go to someone in your town or find someone that sets up banjos, you know, get the action set up, change the strings. Obviously, if your strings are dead, it's going to be hard to play fast. It's going to be hard to slide around, you know. So all those little setup things, get a strap that fits correctly. All those things are going to make a small but important difference in playing faster, okay? All right, so hopefully that gives you some tips to play faster. Remember, be patient. You're not going to get this overnight. There's no shortcuts. You just have to put in the time. Sometimes you might be doing everything right, but you just need to log more hours. And that can be really tough to hear and remember. But patience is the name of the game in trying to increase your speed and control. But just be diligent. You know, a couple of minutes a day is better than a half hour once a week. Oh, and one more thing I should recommend. It's super important to warm up, okay? So even me, I've been playing a long time, maybe 10, 12, or 13 years now, or 12 years or something, and I still need to warm up to play fast, okay? I had to warm up before I recorded this video if I'm going to start to play fast. I warm up before every show. You know, you can't just pull the banjo out of the case and play your fastest. That's not realistic. You know, I might spend a half hour, 45 minutes warming up before I can even get to my top speed. And that is just something you have to learn from trial and error. But usually I can really play my top speed after, you know, a half hour, an hour, or even a couple hours some days of really good warm-up. You know, and it all depends on the situation. You know, if I'm going to a show and I've been sitting in the van for 9 hours and I get out and, you know, there's a lot of tension from sitting in an uncomfortable van, you know, I need that much longer to warm up, get relaxed, to be playing at my highest level. So just remember, keep that in your back pocket that you do need to warm up as well. Just like lifting weights or exercising, you can't just go in there cold and do your absolute best. So remember, warming up is super important to being able to play faster as well. All right, hopefully that gives you some tips. All right, good luck.